Good morning, and thank you for joining me on Health Talks. My name is Dr. Christopher Amoruso, and I was inspired this morning by one of my patients, a lovely couple that brought me a gift this morning. I was inspired to do a brief talk on measles. And it's really not just about measles, but I think most people can remember in the last few years hearing about outbreaks over the course of time on the news, and it really gets drummed up and played out to be like this dangerous and worst case scenario. I think the most recent one that sticks in people's minds is the Disneyland incident that happened in 2015, where there was, in the 20s, I think 20 cases reported. I want to look at this situation from the standpoint of history, and that's how it pertains to my two patients, Pedro and Astrid, who were in with their beautiful son, Gael, this morning, who just turned 1 year old and is completely healthy and unvaccinated. I want to show you a book that they brought me. It's a book, and I know it's going to be backwards on the screen here, but it's Babar and the Doctor. And this was originally printed, according to the copyright here, in Great Britain in 1972. But I believe the origin of this is actually French, 1969. It was translated later into English. There are many different Babar editions. A lot of you may remember from childhood. The reason I'm bringing this up is because there is an interesting storyline here where the children in the story are ill. They have the typical measles symptoms. The doctor is shown here looking at his patients down their throats with his light, which actually is called a torch in here. I thought that was quite interesting. I think the British use that word to represent more of a flashlight. But you can see here on this page, if you can hold it up to a mirror, you'll be able to see that it says, once the diagnosis is made by the doctor, the motherly figure there is actually quite happy. She says, "Oh, good." She's happy that it's diagnosed, and she says, "I thought that's what it was." And a few pages later, after the doctor administers a little care, which you can see here illustrated, okay, you'll see on this page that after a day or two, the children are happy and playing, and the doctor comes by to visit them. And it says up here at the top, and I know, again, you might not be able to read it, but it says, "Measles isn't a serious illness." So after a few days, the children were able to get up, but they stayed in their room and played quiet games. And it goes on, and eventually the children bounce back. And I just thought that it was interesting to see that measles was once upon a time, when someone like me was a young child, and even further back, measles was looked at as not a very serious illness. And in fact, even to this day, if you look on the CDC's website, you'll see that the death rate is about 0.2%. And I love when they express percentages that way, because it confuses people. Sometimes the math, the decimals throw people off, but just to put things into perspective, 0.2% expressed as a decimal is 0.002. You have to divide it by 100. And to put that in perspective, in 2014, for example, when there were 660 cases of measles reported in the United States, it's 660, 0.2% of measles cases are fatal, which means that out of those 660 cases, one child would have been at risk for dying, 1.3 children to be exact. But my point is this: I'm not trying to say that ignorance is an excuse for bliss, and I'm not trying to say that people should let their children get sick and do nothing. What I am saying, though, is that I think it is highly unreasonable for the CDC to take a disease like the measles, which they have ignored the risk factors and the evidence that there is about the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines, and the dangers and the risks that they pose to the children, and the connection between all types of illnesses, including autism. And I myself, even as a chiropractor, have more than a dozen patients that I can point to that will tell you their children who are either autistic or on the autistic spectrum, or maybe perhaps have other syndromes like Asperger's, that they will conclusively tell you occurred right after their children were given the MMR shot. But what strikes me as most concerning in this country is the move to take away a lot of our rights, and especially as parents. And what I mean by that is that recently in August of 2016, and probably many of you don't know this, but the CDC proposed a rule that would allow them to stop, detain, quarantine, and treat, including vaccinate, any American or non-American person entering this country or traveling between states simply for being suspected of infection by a communicable disease. Now let's think about what that means. It means that the CDC has proposed a rule that would give them the power to apprehend you or your child and forcibly vaccinate them without due process or right of appeal. And according to the CDC's publication called the Rules for the Control of Communicable Diseases, the agency plans to grant itself this power, and in doing so may apprehend any healthy person and detain them indefinitely. If you don't believe me, folks, look this stuff up. It is out there. And it concerns me because in the 1970s, we looked at measles this way. And now it seems to me that we look at measles as an opportunity to drum up more money, push more vaccines down the throats of American people, and do so without allowing people to have the free choice to do as they please with their body or their children. And again, I want to stress, I'm not saying ignorance is an excuse for bliss here. If you're raising your child with the standard American diet, and the standard American drug treatments and antibiotics and Tylenol for fevers and aspirin and so forth, then you can expect to have a sick child. And it's a shame that parents aren't given the education and the information that they rightfully deserve. I was blessed. I was raised by a father who believed in God's laws, believed in quality nutrition and whole food traditional ways of eating, and raised us, all 6 children, without vaccines, without antibiotics, without aspirin. And we all did very well. And I know there's a lot of you out there that may think, well, that's anecdotal. Well, I don't need a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study for common sense. And common sense is that we need to learn how to raise our children healthfully, with healthy foods and access to traditional ways of healing. The answer is not to restrict people's rights and to restrict their ability to decide what goes into their body or their children's bodies. There's got to be a better way. And there are much better ways out there if you search for them. So I encourage people to give this some thought. Think about the way that measles was looked at not too long ago. And think about the way the news and the media outlets push it down our throats nowadays. It's almost like a panic. And unfortunately, panic is the perfect time to take away people's rights. Panic time is the perfect time to drum up money and slide things past people without seeing what's really going on. And in my opinion, what's really going on is being hidden from the American public. So again, I do encourage people to think about this and look at it from the standpoint of what other options are out there, and are there safer, healthier ways to raise our children. There's wonderful information on the Weston Price website at westonaprice.org, and they have wonderful articles and wonderful statistics that show you some of the numbers and what's really going on. So I encourage you to give it some thought and check into our website from time to time. I'll be putting up more information as we go, but I thought this was a great, kind of time travel back in time here to when things were looked at a little differently and were a little bit more innocent. So I want to thank Astrid and Pedro Dominguez and their beautiful son Gael for this wonderful gift. And God bless you and have a wonderful weekend.